Hi, everyone. I'm Mara Webster with In Creative Company, and thank you so much for tuning into one of our talks today. We are a year-round digital talk series bringing you the best creative voices across film, television, and theater. And today we're joined by the really fantastic Kate Siegel, who's currently starring in Netflix's The Haunting of Bly Manor. And I was really fascinated in this series, in your character development and the way that you prepared to play her, given that you've been part of the franchise before, and it's obviously a spin-off. And I was interested in the ways that it was a really useful tool for you as you were starting to map out the details of this character before walking onto set, just knowing exactly what the overall exposition and tone was going to be and the type of world that she was going to fit into.
I thought this character was such a gift. When Mike had asked me to do this, I felt really honored because what's fun about Viola is that she's the story within a story within a story. It's like the third level of Inception in Bly Manor. And knowing that, it was a complete sense of freedom as an actor. I was a fairy tale story. And then our director, Axel Carolyn, she had this huge vision board of old school black and white horror that she wanted to use as inspiration. So we would just riff on that back and forth. And it's a type of freedom you don't get a lot because I was never told to keep it natural or to keep it small. I knew from the very beginning that I was in a storybook story. And that to me was very different than Theo. Theo was very organic and Theo was very human and flawed. Viola is a character in somebody else's story in somebody else's story. And so all pretense of humanism wasn't necessary.
Yeah, I also love that the way that Mike talks about, Gothic romanticism, that everyone always thinks there's like this sweetness to it, but it's actually usually very dark. There's often thriller elements. And so how to kind of like knowing that tonal setup really help, particularly in terms of her story?
I think that if you start with Henry James as a writer, you get a real sense of it. He's very transporting in the way he writes, and it's very much in the style of Gothic romance. There's always a core love story, but that love story is dark, that love story is meaty, and that love story has like hidden shadows in the corner. And once you read a little bit of Henry James, I felt that I had an understanding of where Viola was coming from, where this is a woman who love surprised her. Love was the ghost in her life. Power was her reality, and darkness and death were her realities, and love became the ghost that haunted her and changed her into this monster. And I thought that was so inspiring as an artist. It's such a weird story to tell. And so I think in some ways, Viola embodies the Gothic romance of the entire arc of the season.
Yeah, and even, within the darker moments, what I love about this series personally, because I get way too scared way too easily by a lot of horror pieces, is it's really not attempting to do that. It really is a character piece. It really is a psychological investigation into who these characters are and why they behave in certain ways. And so particularly with some of, the almost slightly jumpier scenes with your character, how did that kind of inform the types of choices that you were making, particularly down to like the physicality and the way that she's moving on screen and the way that you wanted audiences to react to her presence?
Well, I think what makes Bly Manor different from The Haunting of Hill House is that Hill House had a little bit more in the moment terror, like you're talking about. We had ghosts jumping out in episode 8 and like a great jump scare as like a centerpiece for the show. One of the things that Bly does is it plants scares for you. To be scared 2 weeks after you watch, to be scared the next night where something creaks in your house. It's going to have dividends in the horror world for months and months and months. And repeat viewings, you're going to notice more and more things. It's a little bit more insidious. And so starting from there, I started to create the physicality of a character that like when you watch it again, like you just see the kind of sensuality of her turn into a monstrous truth. As the disease eats away at her, as her envy of her sister eats away at her, as the loss of her daughter and the loss of her husband eat away at her, everything about her that was powerful and sensuous degrades. And that sets the stage for the Lady of the Lake, who for the rest of the show has degraded and degrades everything and pulls it down and takes out the life and sucks the life out of it, a long, slow burn, as opposed to a jump scare of a ghost.
Yeah, I was also really interested in terms of the Lady in the Lake segments, just the logistics behind the fact that you're giving a performance essentially without a face. And I was curious about how those were filmed, if you had anything kind of covering your face or if it was dots on your face or if it was all just something that was added in post-production and how that came together and how that influenced your performance in those scenes.
Well, the truth of the matter is that when they started filming Bly, I had a very young baby at home. And so as much as I wanted to go traipsing around a haunted mansion barefoot and soaking wet and like scaring like Oliver and scaring Raoul, I simply couldn't do it. I was breastfeeding. I was staying up at night. So we had an incredible stand-in who plays Lady of the Lake, Danielle Dibb, and she wore the full silicone mask. And it had cutouts for the eyes, and it had a cutout here. And so they fixed that in post. And then when I got up there to do the pieces that very clearly had to be Lady of the Lake, a lot of that was done, like what you said, they put little dots on your face, and then our incredible special effects team go in after the fact, and they paint out my features.
Yeah. And was there water stunt work involved in the scenes?
Oh my God, was there water stunt work? A lot of people have recurring dreams about flying. For most of my life, I have a recurring dream about being able to breathe underwater. Like I think I'm drowning and then my gills open up and I can breathe and it feels like flying. Those are my freedom dreams. And so I was stoked. I was like, this is my time to shine. This is my time to like have my dreams come true. And we had a water team that taught me two different techniques. One is what they use for free diving, which is how to hold your breath for a very long time. So now I can hold my breath for about 2 minutes based on these meditation techniques, which is a great skill to have if you have young kids. It really scares them. The second one is I did a scuba certification. And so for all of the lake stuff, we had 2 sets for that. One was on location at Bly Manor. They made a lake that they would take me out into the lake, and my nightgown had weights in it. And so they would weight me to the bottom of the lake, and I would hold my breath holding 2 sandbags until the water stilled. And then I would slowly release sandbags and weights. And so I could like rise out of the water and then move slowly. And we're shooting this at like 2 a.m. It's freezing cold. And it's such guerrilla filmmaking for such a like highbrow Netflix show, I guess a highbrow horror show, that it felt like old school movie making. I felt like, a Bela Lugosi monster. And then the second thing, when you see me under the water, that was tanks on a stage. And so we had a big pool, and at the bottom of the pool, they had dressed it with like, those fake plants in aquariums that they can like move. And they again put weights in my gown, and they laid me down, and they have these invisible nose plugs that go all the way up. This was pre-COVID, so I didn't know that this was like a precursor for the next 6 months of my life to have something shoved up my nose. And I laid on the bottom, and somebody would come down with a scuba tank and a mask, and I would take a deep breath of air, and then I would hold my breath again for a long period of time. And there were speakers retrofitted into the walls of this tank. So Axel could say to me, like, open your eyes, close your eyes, open your eyes, close your eyes, because we had to shoot that particular series a bunch of times. And it was a joy. I felt like a small child having a birthday party. I was like, I'm breathing underwater, even though I clearly wasn't, like I was scuba diving, but it's one of my favorite memories of filmmaking.
That's so fantastic. And I wanted to ask you about, you were just mentioning Axel, one of the directors on the show, and Mike directed some of the episodes. Kind of what was the way that Mike would kind of create an environment that was really conducive for you and the rest of the cast and work with you on developing your performances, but really transcend that to all of the different directors that were coming in and out?
Well, Mike has a very specific taste level and tone level. He's an exacting boss, but he's harder on no one else than he is on himself. And so he accepts, like he'll check the paper clips and be like, are these paper clips the right era for the 1980s? Or when did this shape of paper? He wants it to be like that. And so when the bar is set that high by your boss who's working 18 hours a day to make sure everything is perfect, I think that the pressure is on to make sure that you complete his vision, that you deliver on that level as well. And I think we all felt it trickle down, the directors, the actors, all the way down to sound, PAs, everybody. And to me, I find that freeing to know that I'm going to be held to a standard. I should do my very best. And because he is at his core a Gothic romantic, he knows when you're doing your best. He just knows, and he allows that. And sometimes your best has to be exactly what it is. And I think that's true of his characters. And I think that's true of the people he chooses to work with over and over again. At their core, they're going to give you their very best. And so I believe the tone of Bly was set early on with the cast and the directors and the production designers and the DP. And then he trusts people. He trusts his actors to create the way he hired them to do. And that in itself becomes the vision.
Yeah. And in terms of the camera work and the choices there, there's so many intrinsic, specific, detail-oriented choices. And there's so many moments, particularly with your performance, where there's a lot of close-ups where the camera really just kind of lingers very slowly on her. And I was interested in the way that that informed some of the choices that you made for your performance, knowing that that was what the setup was going to be.
More than any other show, I watched playback on that. And that's just when between takes, I would go have them play back what they just shot, because we were using these weird fisheye lenses. And like you said, they were long, slow pushes. And like I said earlier, I wasn't really a grounded human character. I was a story tale, like a fairy tale character. And so I would have to go watch and be like, oh, show me that image again, Axel, that thing. This is the like old painting you wanted to reference in this shot. And we'd kind of dial it in that way more than other performances that tend to be like, what's my motivation? What's my moment before? This was more like living art in this episode.
Yeah. When you were preparing with the scripts, did you find that you were diving actually much more heavily into the narration details and the details that were describing her because of that?
I think the two things that I kept going back to was the relationship between the sisters. Mm-hmm. That was hugely important to me. I have a sister I love and adore and is my best friend. And Katie Parker, who plays my sister, I love and adore and is one of my best friends. And I thought that on its face, it's a story about the romance between the romantic love triangle between Viola, Arthur, and Perdita, but it's really a love story about these sisters. And to me, if I could drill down on that, and that's where my moments of truth, and those were my moments of kind of elevation, and where it becomes less of a fairy tale and more of something the audience can grab onto. Like they have a sister, or they have a best friend, or they have somebody they love like that, who in their life has betrayed them, or in their life has turned everything upside down or taken something from them. And their love and their rage are so close to each other that they can't quite tell the difference. And it gets murky. And so for me, it was more that than the narration and the facts of the story, because like any good parable, this is a story about the dangers of love. And I think to me, I wanted that to be those little crumbs I would leave of truth within this fairy tale.
Yeah. And in terms of the on-screen relationship, what did that creative and collaborative process look like between you and Katie in developing it? Because you really don't have very many lines with each other to put that forth, but you put forward such a layered relationship and such a history. And we know so much about who they are and how they interact with each other through the way that you bring it to screen.
Katie and I spent a lot of time talking about our families and our sisters. And again, we're old friends. And so we had a lot of history to build on. And then this is pre-COVID. So when we're shooting in the house, they are switching the house over, the manor over from the 1980s to the 1800s. And so certain rooms hadn't been changed. Like, for example, we had Miles's bedroom as a holding area, which means where they stored us between takes and setups. And Katie and I would just pile into Miles's bed together and read and giggle and watch YouTube videos and just like all the things. There was no physical boundary between us, because sisters growing up, especially in that time and even now, I find that they're very tactile. They're always touching. And so the energy between them feels very physical. And that's where it starts to have that love story feeling. It's like a new romance, but always sisters are always reaching out. At least me and my sister always reaching out for each other, piling on each other. And we wanted that feeling, even when they were fighting, even when I was hitting her, even when she was killing me. It was intimate. It was entirely close. It's a hug and a murder. It's a very strange experience. And to have the body you trust the most be the body that's killing you. And we wanted that physicality to be a huge part of their relationship. And so when they're separate, that's when they start to feel like specters, like not real people. They're just these fine women. But when they get close to each other and they can like move their bodies again, that's when they start to be human.
Yeah. And in terms of the time period which your plotline takes place in, I thought that was really fascinating too, because your character is very much someone who doesn't adhere to like what is expected of her. You know, she's going to behave the way that she wants. She's going after, that power and really holding on to things. And I was interested in like how specific you wanted or felt like you needed to get in terms of that time period, given that, like you said, it is a story within a story. So it's not necessarily a straight linear reality. And so how true to life did you want that to be?
Well, it's interesting, isn't it? Because all the history we have from that time is written by men. Mm-hmm. So they don't actually know what the women were doing. They were traveling, doing business, hunting. They had these whole lives. And when they came back, what they saw were these subservient women who had been beaten into submission or whatever. They had these little glimpses of them, and they were property, these women. They were given with a dowry and money, and there wasn't a lot of marriage for romantic love at the time. Mm-hmm. And so I just thought, these guys didn't know what they were talking about. They don't know what the women were doing. Why in any world would the humans then be different than the humans now? The desires for love, connection, power, to be respected, to not lose your home, the sorrow of losing your father, the jealousy of your sister. I just didn't think it was any different. I couldn't reconcile these people that these men wrote about with any of the women I knew. They just didn't seem real. And then I thought, well, what if every man I knew was writing the story of the women that I knew? And I'd be like, yeah, they only have a very small glimpse of my friends. They only have a very small moment. And so at a certain point, I was just like, yeah, fuck it. This is a person. I'm a person. Like, and if I messed it up, oh no, I disrespected a white male historian. Sue me.
Do you find for yourself that the costumes are a really important part to kind of just use the character, and particularly with this, because they're such specific, brilliant costumes?
Can you hold on for just 1 second?
Yeah.
I have one here.
Oh my gosh.
So I have one here.
It's amazing.
This is, Axel was very into these costumes, as we all were. And she had a moon, a stars, and the sundress. And of course, it's shot in black and white. But if you can see this, like the corsetry, the artistry of these costumes, because we kept going back to the name of the episode isn't like The Love Between Sisters or like A Woman's Place. It's called The Romance of Certain Old Clothes. So it's got to be about the clothes. And I was ready for that. But like, look at this detail.
Wow.
And then like fully made corsets, all of them, every single one. We must have done 12, 13 fittings. Lynn Falconer, whew, that woman like delivered for me. And that changes everything. Like once you put this corset on with all of these rhinestones and this like shimmering, because they really could have phoned it in. It was black and white. Like it's an episode that is a bottle episode, but every single one. Anyway, I have 2 of them. Katie has 2 of them. I'm going to rework one. So if I ever get to go anywhere ever again, I can wear it. But yeah, the
so
costumes
interesting
were
looking at the texture of the material as well, because it's completely different to what you would expect, and like that shininess. I'm so interested in how that then looks and translated on screen in terms of the black and white visuals.
So this is from the scene where all the suitors are there. I think it's right at the beginning montage, and it's all spread out, and I have the little fan, and I'm fanning myself. But it's just this incredible dress. I'm just like, should I put it on now? Probably.
You should just wear it when you're doing the dishes or cleaning.
Absolutely. Maybe I'll save it for my daughter. She'll love it.
Yeah. Did you find that also, you know, given that it is that really intrinsic corsetry, did that also really help in terms of the way that you moved in scenes, the way that you walked, the way that you held yourselves?
I literally had to do 0 work for tuberculosis. I was like, the whole thing, because all I had to do was really react to being tightened in, because Katie Parker was smart enough to have all of her corsets turned into zippers so she could just get in and out. I was a real... like just a real drama school kid. I was like, tighter, we have to hold the pole and they're yanking me. And I just wanted it to be so restrictive. I thought that was very important for Viola. That's very important to her, to be tied into things. That's very much what she's against.
Yeah. I also wanted to talk a little bit about, you know, the location of the show. Obviously it's such a central part to it. It's the title of the film. And, you know, whenever you're filming something in a singular location, it's always has such a great relationship between actors and the space, but particularly with this, and given her personal relationship and the fact that it's such a driving force in so many things, how did that kind of uniquely inform the way that you were approaching this character within the physical space itself?
I think, if asked about it, you know, in front of a fireplace and a long enough night with enough wine, I think everybody could say that there was a home they loved, or there was a place they loved in the way that they loved a person. Like they had a romance with a location. And I have that place, and it's my private place. And sometimes when I can't sleep because the thoughts are too much or the fears are too much, I walk through it in my head. And this is a technique that lots of different therapists and lots of different meditative coaches will give you, just like walk through somewhere where you feel comfortable and it'll help you relax and fall asleep. And for Viola, that's Bly. It just is. She loves it. It's everything that she knows. Yeah. It's everything she adores. It's her safety. It's also her albatross. Like it's her whole world. And whenever I would get lost with her, within her like strength, because sometimes strength it can push people away, especially a viewer. And I wanted in the private moments for the viewer to feel like they were seeing inside her a bit, like that they were private with her, because it's a story within a story. We're telling a parable. We need to see her soft underbelly. And I'd always just sit there and I would look at the house. And I would find something in the room I loved. There's paintings that I loved in the room that was my father's office. I loved it. The fabric of the bed in the bedroom, the fabric of my sister's dress, the fabric of I guess I love fabric. Maybe because I was just holding fabric. But there was this huge armoire that I would look at and love. And I thought that those moments is such a truth of humanity that we don't see a lot, which is people love places.
Yeah. And then one of the other choices is the voice and the tone of voice that you use and the way that she speaks, I thought was so interesting. And I really wanted to ask you about how you landed on those specific choices that you ended up going with there.
Well, vocally speaking, this is a little bit behind the curtain. When Mike asked me to do this, he said, "How are you with accents?" And I said, oh, wow. Just so good, so confident, so not confident. And he tried and tried and tried. And luckily I don't speak a lot. But what ended up happening was Carlo Gugino has an incredible accent and Alex Esso has an incredible accent. And so sometimes I would ask them to kind of say something for me, but both of them have very low-pitched, low-toned voices. And I wish I had a better reasoning as to why my voice had that kind of resonance to it. But no, it was just that the people teaching me how to do the accent had low resonant voices. And so I just kind of did that.
But it worked out perfectly.
Thank God, right? Like creative solutions for terrifying problems.
Yeah. And I wanted to ask you a little bit about what the specific limitations were as you all were filming this. Obviously you were mentioning it's a Netflix project. There was a huge budget, but every single production, there's always some sort of limitation that everybody's working up against. And I was really interested to know what that was on this particular project.
The weather at Bly Manor, just rain and mud and like freezing cold and wind. And I was walking places barefoot in the middle of winter. I was getting in the lake in the middle of winter in a flimsy nightgown, the rain. And it's just oppressive. Like it just ends up making you feel kind of down. And that to me, I felt like I was coming up against weather every day. Like I'm walking in the rain, my feet are in freezing mud. And so you have to really kind of, for lack of a less woo-woo phrase, like you have to tap into your gratitude, because your physical extremity, like your physicality is cold, but your soul is joyful. So you have a choice there, right? You can either focus on my feet maybe will fall off. I don't know if I'll have feet after this. Or you focus on, I'm so full of joy to be working with people I love, doing what I love, telling a story I love. And so it's really a choice.
Yeah. And one of the things that I love about watching you play this character is it's such a different character to so many of the other ones. And so from your perspective, I was interested in what are kind of either the types of decisions that you had to make to play this character, or the places that it really took you to, on a craft or an emotional level as an actor that you really hadn't had to tap into on previous roles.
What I loved about this was it felt very collaborative with Axel. One of the things I did here, like with Theo and with Maddie from Hush, I was accessing parts of myself. I really felt like I was kind of finding the 20-year-old version of Kate for Theo, or the terrified version of Kate for Maddie. Like it felt very close to me. And so I was less receptive to notes because I'd be like, no. I'm going to do this the way I know this is supposed to go. And of course I take notes because I'm a professional and I'd like to get a job after this. So like I take notes very well, but especially with Viola, I put so much trust in my director, and I would try a bunch of different things in various takes. I'd be like, well, I feel like we need a strong one. And I think we maybe need a sensitive one. And then we need kind of a dismissive one. And then we probably need like a flirty one, so that she would know. And then she would get in there with her tools, like a tiny little Dr. Frankenstein, and just kind of build with me what she needed to paint the picture she was creating. And I found that to be, that level of collaboration, to be very inspiring and satisfying.
That's so wonderful. Well, thank you so much for taking time to talk about this and sharing the costumes as well. That was so fun.
I'm sorry to run away out of the interview, but I thought it was worth it, because
it was absolutely worth it.
I love it. Thank you so much.